Okay, so we're on page 10 and we're looking at section 2, the discussion of the acts. So the play's got 2 acts, it's got act 1 and act 2 with an interval in the middle. Alright, so the analysis of act 1, the scene is set. So it's time to get stuck into the juicy details. You need to know the play inside and out, back to front for the exam. So if you're still a little shaky on the plot, have another look over the summary on pages 4 to 5. And don't forget, you've got your cartoon plot of the play to help you remember what comes and what sequences that they are in. So use that all the time when you're looking and analysing and trying to remember the play. So it says the play begins with the ending. The narrator's opening speech tells the basic story of the play. His speech takes place in the form of a prologue, and we'll look at that at page 44. So the theme is fate and superstition. So a theme is a drip, drip, drip of ideas that come together to create a theme. So fate and superstition. So the link between the narrator and fate is established straight away. So when we talk about fate, it's something that is bound to happen. Okay, every time he reappears, it reminds us that the twins are going to die. Okay. So number 2 says, this means that the audience knows how the story ends before it even begins, and which suggests that the characters can't escape this fate. Okay, so it tells you how that they are going to die at the very beginning. The narrator speaks in rhyme and uses old-fashioned and mystical phrases like "of one womb born" and "lie slain," and this creates an unsettling and ominous atmosphere. So try and research all these underlined words. If it's unsettling, it means that it doesn't feel right, and an ominous atmosphere, it's almost like when the hairs go stiff on the back of your neck, or you get goosebumps, that type of feeling in the atmosphere. Okay. However, it changes quickly, doesn't it? And it says Mrs. Johnstone sings about her past. So Mrs. Johnstone's story makes the audience feel sympathy for her. Her husband has walked out on her, leaving her with 7 children to look after and another on the way. So remember, she starts to sing, doesn't she, at the beginning of the play. So Mrs. Johnstone introduced the motifs of Marilyn Monroe and dancing. And a motif is a recurring symbol. So what you'll need to do there is do your own little bit of research about Marilyn Monroe. Now, Marilyn Monroe was famous in the 1950s, and she was very, very glamorous and very, very famous actress. Okay, and dancing, when you are dancing, it's a feeling of freedom and happiness, isn't it? Okay, so you've got this. When she was young, she was feeling a bit like Marilyn Monroe, and she always went dancing. So that shows a young and carefree Mrs. Johnstone before she had her children and before she got married. So at this point, Marilyn Monroe is used to represent perfection and a glamorous lifestyle, and that's how she saw herself before she got married and pregnant. And dancing symbolises freedom and happiness, and marriage and children take that away from Mrs. Johnstone. So the milkman interrupts her. So she's in this lovely little bubble of imagination, but the milkman interrupts her, and her children start complaining. She can't even dream about happiness because her real life problems get in the way. So she's found that she's really trapped at this point. So the writer's technique, so you'll need to refer to these when you do your exam questions. It says the children are all off stage as they shout their complaints, so you don't see them but you can hear them, while Mrs. Johnstone stands alone. It's represented that she is absolutely alone. She's been abandoned by her husband. And this emphasises that Mrs. Johnstone is surrounded by an overwhelming responsibility which she has to deal with on her own. So let's go back to the structure of family life that was depicted then. You had the husband and the wife with just a small family of 2 children, However, Mrs. Johnstone is very different from that. She's having to act as both mother and father and the breadwinner, and has to look after the children and do all of the housework and everything as well. So she's got a massive responsibility on her shoulders, and she's feeling the strain. She can't even daydream about how wonderful life was without being interrupted. For something like the milkman, sorry, who is asking for her to pay a bill because she can't pay it. She can't go out to work because she's got all the children to look after. So the class divide is obvious from the start. Mrs. Johnstone arrives at Mrs. Lyons' house with a brush, dusters and a mop bucket. So that indicates straight away that she is of working class. Whereas Mrs. Lyons is carrying a parcel containing new shoes. So that suggests that Mrs. Lyons is middle class, because she's got spare money to go and buy new shoes. She doesn't have to, all of the money doesn't go just on all of the family and food and paying the bills. She's got what we call disposable income. There are some key differences that are immediately established. Mrs. Johnstone is poor, whereas Mrs. Lyons is rich. So Willie Russell is using opposites to create this scene. Mrs. Johnstone works, whereas Mrs. Lyons spends the money that her husband earns. She doesn't have to work. They've got enough money to be able to keep that big house, employ a cleaner and have disposable income, and spend on things that are not essential. Mrs. Johnstone can't stop having children, whereas Mrs. Lyons can't have kids. Now the irony of that, she wanted this large house full of kids, Mrs. Lyons, and by twist of fate, again we've got this word fate, she can't have any children to fill this lovely big house. She's got so much to offer and she's got all the money to be able to do it, but she can't have the children. And Mrs. Johnson is superstitious, whereas Mrs. Lyons is not. Now we know about the superstitions because Mrs. Lyons tries to put the shoes on the table, and Mrs. Johnstone says, oh no, don't put them on there, it's bad luck. Okay, so, and it's her reaction. So you need to talk about and understand about her immediate reaction. It's not like something that she's thought about and said, you shouldn't really put them on there. It's a real what's the word I'm looking for? It's a real knee-jerk reaction. It's quite over the top. So your exam tip is write about how Russell establishes some key themes. So talk about in your answers what we've just talked about on this page, and that will really raise your levels of your understanding. So right from the off, Russell puts social class at the forefront of the audience's minds. It's clear that the two families are very different. The prologue also establishes the twins' fate. Bit of a spoiler really. Okay, you need to talk about that in your answers as well.